Hey guys, this is Caspi with Tape, and today you join me for episode 7 of Realism Overhaul Project Luna. And today we go to the moon, not because it's easy and all that nonsense. So today we're actually going to go and land some Kerbals on the moon. So we have ourselves our Griffin 6 vehicle, and I'm going to talk through it right now. We're going to go through the whole thing. I know I've explained this rocket before, but I thought there's been some changes, and, you know, it's a big thing. I thought it would be nice to look at all of it. So, what do we have here? Well, we have the Gigantus 1 vehicle, which is of course the giant vehicle. The bottom stage is powered by these RS-68 engines, which were used on the Delta 4, well, are used on the Delta 4. These each provide 3.4 meganewtons of thrust, and there are 9 of them, kind of like the Falcon 9, but way bigger. So, that provides all the thrust for the first stage, and it burns liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. This first stage has been extended by 2 meters, just to give me a little more delta V, because we needed a slightly bigger payload. So it just has a few hundred more meters per second of delta V. Because we need it. So yeah, that's the first stage. The second stage is exactly the same as it has been in the last few episodes, powered by this M1 series engine, which is an experimental engine, never flew, but it would have been the most powerful Hydrolox engine in the world, and obviously it burns Hydrolox. It provides 6.7 meganewtons of thrust. It's beautiful, and I'm glad to use it on this rocket. This adapter's been extended out a little bit because although the second stage hasn't been changed at all, the third stage has been changed quite considerably, so it's much fatter now. That's because, well, we needed more delta V. Last time in the test, the third stage failed to push to make orbital insertion by itself of the moon. Well, not orbital insert. It failed to failed to complete the whole burn, basically, by a few hundred meters per second of delta V, and the payload's actually a little heavier than it was then now, so it's been extended out by about, I think, 0.7 meters, so it's much thicker, and it also needed to be extended out because the payload is wide, as you'll see, because of the lander. So yeah, it's still the same. It still uses a J2 engine. Of course, the second and third stage engine from the Saturn V seemed appropriate. Provides about a meganewton of thrust and burns Hydrolox. So yeah, it's mostly been extended to provide extra delta V, but also because the payload is pretty wide. Yes, we have ourselves, of course, our lunar lander. So we'll ditch the third stage right there and take a look through the lander. So this is, of course, the thing that will go and land on the moon. And it looks a little weird right now. That's because the landing legs are, well, tucked in. It is using the Apollo landing legs, but that's the only Apollo thing it's using, I think. So we're going to extend them out just so it looks not normal, not weird, and talk through this. So we'll go from the landing stage up. It's using a XLR81 engine, which is the Agena vacuum engine. This provides 67 kilonewtons of thrust, and yeah, it was used on Agena, of course, the American vehicle from the Gemini program, which the Gemini program actually was going to be the moon program, but didn't actually work out that way. Because it was the Apollo program was ready earlier, I believe. So yeah, that's that. This burns monomethyl hydrazine and what's IRFNA? It's, oh, I do know this. It's oh yeah, so okay, so I don't know what the I stands for, but it's red fuming nitric acid, the nicest of of fuels. And on the side, of course, we have ourselves a little rover, a little moon buggy, much as many of the Apollo missions brought. And to counterbalance that, we have a little tank of hydrazine over here. This just counterbalances it and provides us just more hydrazine, because this doesn't have a reaction wheel in its second stage, so it's entirely controlled with RCS, so it's nice to have some extra hydrazine. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Then, of course, it's a 2-stage lander. It actually should look like this. The fairings are a little fucky, but that's how it looks. So when it launches away from the moon, it has its second stage, which uses an Asterisk engine. We've used this a lot. I really like it. It's a really reliable, it's just a good engine. It's a German engine, provides 22.5 kilonewtons of thrust, and burns Aerozine 50 and nitrogen tetroxide. Which is, yeah, so what we've done here is we've got a bunch of these conic tanks and 6 symmetried them around the engine, so it's really compact, so the lander isn't too top heavy. And then you'll be looking at this lander can saying, is that a one-man lander can, man? We don't want a one-man lander can. No, this is a two-man lander cam. It's basically just an upgraded version of the one-man thing. I don't really know how it's a two-man lander cam, but it is, so yeah, and it's very light, which makes this all much easier. So yeah, that's that. And then, of course, we have the command module, which is, well, the command module. I've hit a button. Okay, I just accidentally closed this into the VAB. And we've seen this before. It's using the AJ10 upper stage engines, the extended version, so they provide 35 kilonewtons of thrust. Of course, a very popular American engine. And it's been moved, the RCS has been moved slightly since we found that it wasn't effective last time. Escape system's still the same, everything else is still the same. So yeah, that is the vehicle. That is all of the things. Let's go and see it fly right now. So here we are on the launch pad at Cape Canaveral with the Griffin 6 atop a gigantus one launch vehicle. We fire up the engines, listen to them roar, and then release the clamps, letting it move skyward towards the moon. Finally, we shall land on the moon. So yeah, hopefully this will go well. We've done a lot of testing. That was kind of the focus of this series, really, was just to see kind of, you know, let's really refine this, because it's been a very long time since I've landed on the moon in Realism Overhaul, and it was a very different set of mods back then. So I had to get used to everything. But, you know, last episode we did our final tests. Everything worked pretty much, and everything that didn't work we fixed. And now we just hope that the lander works, because that is untested. Well, not untested, but obviously has never flown and landed on the moon before. So yeah, we're climbing up now, everything's going well. Hopefully we won't have to do a launch abort, as we have had to so many times in this series. Although it is fun to see. But these rockets, these bigger rockets, seem extremely controllable, less likely to flip in the atmosphere. I guess they're just, maybe just because their mass is just harder to move, probably, and they have more, you know, 9 gimbaling engines. This is a very controllable vehicle, hence having no fins on the side, which is something I've been kind of aiming for, because I don't really like the look of fins on the sides of rockets. We get rid of the abort system now. That flies off at a, well, quite a clip, and now we'll just push on into orbit. Getting rid of the abort system obviously saves us a little bit of delta V, but means we can't abort late in the mission, which we almost never have to. We once had one very late abort, but you know, it's not a problem. That's the nice thing actually about the Dragon 2 on the SpaceX's manned vehicle, is because its abort system is built into it, it'll be able to abort the whole way into flight, which is pretty cool. Although apparently it's not propulsive landing anymore. Anyway, we ditched the first stage. It's Ullage motors pulling it away now. There, and then we fire up the M1 engine and start moving on into orbit. Now, the payload is slightly heavier now, so there is, you know, our thrust-to-weight ratio isn't quite as good, so it'll be slightly tricky to get to orbit, but it should be fine, and hopefully we'll have enough fuel. I have cut it pretty fine, though, because turned out the third stage just needed to be quite a bit bigger, especially to house the lander payload, because I wanted to put a rover on it. Oh, that was so dumb. Like, I had to rework so much stuff to get that on there. But yeah, anyway, everything's going well. But no, I was talking about SpaceX, and apparently I heard a while ago that although they will be keeping the integrated abort system, it won't be how they're landing the vehicle anymore, which is a real shame, but it's pretty hard to convince NASA and people that you're going to land them propulsively on rockets really safely. It's hard to human rate that. But yeah, I guess they'll just land on parachutes then. Makes their comment about it looking like a crash a little bit like, oh, well, wrecked. But no, it's a little bit of a shame. But anyway, why am I talking so much about SpaceX? We should be talking about this mission, but it was a long launch. I wanted to fill it with something interesting. But we're coming to the end of it now. We're getting up to speed. Our delta V is really, really fine. I really wasn't sure that this would work right now. Just praying, just watching those lines extend, watching the numbers drop. But eventually, we get into orbit with 100 meters per second of delta V spare, and then we start planning our maneuver onto the moon. So yeah, the second stage performed perfectly, 100 meters per second spare. That's just brilliant. And now we've got our encounter all locked in with the moon. We'll ditch that second stage. I mean, we could use the 100 meters per second of delta V, but it will be pointless. This burn will be 3.1 kilometers of delta V, and we have 3.4 in this third stage. So we're all good. Anyway, I need to activate the RCS, enable some crossfeed and things so that I can turn this spacecraft and also use the thrusters for ullage, just making sure the lander thrusters weren't firing, and they're not, which is good because they're inside of fairing. And then we maneuver to where we move to where we perform our burn, and we fire up the engine, and we'll be heading on to the moon. So we've launched at almost the perfect inclination, less maybe like 0.2 of a degree, so we're okay. So we won't have to do an inclination change, which means this whole transfer will take only cost 3,100 meters per second of delta V, leaving 300 in the tanks of the third stage. Won't matter really, we're just gonna let it hit the moon, but you know, it's cool. It's cool that this worked well. I guess again we could use that delta V, but I'm confident we have enough delta V in the other parts of the vehicle that we don't need to like jankily use the third stage for part of an insertion burn into the moon. We want it to hit the moon. We want to do this kind of realistically, using stages for what they're meant for, and if they have extra fuel, that's fine. But anyway, the burn is well underway now. It does take a while, of course. 3 kilometers per second of delta V is quite a lot. More delta V than you would probably expend going anywhere from Kerbin, but of course this is real solar system. We have ourselves real-sized planets, but we do have the advantage of things being much lighter. In this base game of KSP, all the tanks and things are actually much heavier to kind of counter the smaller solar system. It's very different. Anyway, we get our encounter, and it actually is going to hit the moon, which is totally what I planned, and not just like, oh, yeah, we should probably do that with the third stage. But anyway, now we need to turn around. Well, we need to detach the command module, turn around, grab the lander, let the third stage hit the moon, and make sure our Kerbals avoid hitting the moon, because that would be no good. So we decouple the command module, we move forward, turn ourselves around so that we can face the docking port. We're going to get rid of the little decoupler in a second, because we don't need that anymore. That's just the little strut that held us to the lander. And yes, so then we get lined up, start moving towards the lander, performing a, well, very careful maneuver. This is going much better than in testing last time, where we failed to dock because the vehicle was rotating and because our RCS was poorly placed. But yes, now we've grabbed the lander, we detach it from the third stage and move on, because, well, we don't need that anymore. We fire up the engines to burn retrograde a little bit so that we don't hit the moon. We just glide past the moon. Well, glide, what? Just move, just fly past the moon. So, yeah, there we go. That's 400. Yeah, we'll just tweak that with RCS, but, you know, it looks pretty good. And then we arrive at the moon. Our Kerbal's rather happy. 2 of them will get to go and land. Jeb and someone else. I guess the engineer, whichever Bill, Bob, whichever one of them's an engineer. Anyway. Then we get down to our periapsis, fire up the RCS thrusters for ullage, and then fire up the engines to perform our 800 meters per second burn to get us into orbit. And yes, we'll have more than enough fuel to get home. My predictions and calculations were right. Since we didn't fully test that last time, I had to just kind of check the numbers, and it'll be okay, because we'll burn about 800 meters per second now, and the delta V we'll have left over will increase once we've dropped the lander, so we'll actually have about 1100 for going back to Kerbin, which is more than enough, and then we'll allow for a slowdown maneuver when we get to periapsis of Kerbin. So, well, of Earth, even Earth. So yeah, it's all going very well. This is going. I'm very pleased with how well this is going. Planning will solve all your problems. So we get into orbit, and then we do a little tweak to circularize it. And then it's time to get our Kerbals across. Annoyingly, apparently the hatches are broken and we can't actually transfer crew, so we have to EVA, which, that's the one failure. It would have been really nice to like transfer them across. I even opened the hatches, I did everything right, but I guess it's just broken, so we have to EVA across. So we take Jeb and the engineer, which I think is Bill Kerman? Yeah, let's say Bill Kerman. And now we're ready. We're just going to activate our RCS thrusters, decouple the spacecraft, and head on down there. So we'll leave good old Bob up in orbit, taking on the Michael Collins role, waiting in orbit, probably taking a picture of everyone who's ever existed except himself. I would that would be quite poetic to take that picture. Of course, Michael Collins, I believe it was Michael Collins who took the picture of the moon where the Apollo 11 astronauts Buzz and Neil would have been, and then Earth was in the background, so it contained everyone except him, which was pretty incredible. That's nice. Anyway, so yes, so now we're getting ready to land. We've done our de-orbit burn, and we're going to go and land in the flat part, the kind of darker part of the moon. I don't know what you call it. I'm not a moon geographer, moon Moon Man? What's a moon researcher called? A lunar researcher? I don't know. Clearly not. I don't even know what that would be called. I was going for geology. Moon geologist? Yeah, there we go. Anyway, we're orientating ourselves so that the rover's on top of the spacecraft because it is still slightly heavy, and despite our reaction wheel and our counterweight, it still does tend to tilt, and it would be better if it tilted upward, not sideways. So yeah, we're going to do this landing in a number of burns. Not efficient at all, but I brought more than enough fuel, and efficiency it would probably lead to death. You know, trying to suicide burn it. Because suicide burns are called suicide burns for a reason. And yeah, so I'm going to do a series of slowdown maneuvers. This is going to get me below, I think, 500 meters per second, and then we're going to drift a little bit down to the surface, then get below 300 meters per second, and then like below 100 and so on, until we come to the surface, moving very slowly, and do our final landing burn. So that's the methodology I've picked. We're getting back up to 500 meters per second. We'll fire up the engine again, slowing ourselves down. Yes, I believe we're below 300 meters per second, and then just keep falling. I've got the MechJeb surface info up, so we're still very high above the surface, but I'm taking no chances, and I know I have a lot of fuel to land with, so I should be fine. So yeah, that's, oh, actually below 200 meters per second, and then we'll fall some more and then climb to about 300 meters per second and then slow down again. Obviously, the difference between normal Kerbal space program and this is there is no throttle control, so I just have to fire the engine at the right time and hope. So yeah, now we're kind of at about 100 meters per second. We'll get close to the surface, get below, I think get below 50 is what I do, and then get below 30. So yeah, below 50 meters per second, fall again. And then there'll be one more burn to get me below about 30 meters per second, and then we will do the landing burn, which is always the trickiest part when you can't throttle the engine. You just have to kind of fire at the exact right time, which isn't great. Oh no, I was wrong. There were two more burns. Now the SAS is kind of messing around, so I'm just going to do it manually. And then here we are with the landing burn, firing up just at the right time, and actually this is two burns. So yeah, that engine actually has 15 ignitions. It does have limited ignitions, but 15 is more than enough. The engine we used last time for landing the rover had 5, so I thought 15 would be fine. Anyway, we get ourselves Jebediah Kerman out now that we've landed on the moon, hell yeah! And now we're going to get the rover out, and I'm going to put him in the seat and then decouple it, because that'll pop it onto the surface. But tape, that's an odd way of doing it. How did you know you had to do that? Surely you would have just decoupled it. It's not like you quick-saved, is it? Yeah, so it turns out I'd switched the decoupler at the last minute, and it got jammed, and when I tried to kind of get it out, like by ramming it, it sort of didn't go super great. The lander sort of, you know, fell over, and it looks like Jeb's dead. He's just like, oh god, I smashed the glass. So that was how I figured out how you get it out. That did take a few attempts, but I turned the decoupler around at the last minute, and it was a bad choice. But anyway, yes, the rover is free now after a few attempts. Yeah, now we're going to get Bill out to plant her flag, so that we can commemorate this glorious day. Glorious day for Cathenia, apparently. Yes, that's the Cathenia flag from Fall of Kerbin, which is nice to see on the moon. Much better than the Corolans. Hey, the capitalists beat the communists to the moon! I didn't even think of that. Anyway, so yeah, now we get them on the rover. We have a little jaunt around. I like bringing like a rover to the moon because otherwise you just sort of stand there for a bit and then leave. So it was a little costly to get this here, but hey, it worked. I'm pretty happy with how this goes. But of course, it's the rover. It's a rover. It's the moon. It's me. So I flip the rover, and we kind of tumble a bit and sort of, you know, maybe land. Why do I always land on the wrong side? I never just land on my wheels. I always land upside down. And yeah, and then we try and get one of our Kerbals out to try and flip it back, and he sort of falls into the ground. His head's sort of stuck, which is pretty disturbing. But anyway, yeah, we chisel him out of there and then try and flip the rover, but the rover's having none of it. So yeah, that lasted all of like a minute, so that's good. And yeah, so I guess we're just going to head back to the lander now. We actually have no power generation, so we only have, I think, 36 hours to do this, or yeah, and most of the power is actually in the landing stage, so we better be careful, but we should be fine. 36 hours is a long time. And anyway, yes, and now we're just going to get back into the pod now. The pod which is inexplicably a two-man pod, and we actually find out how the mod developer has done that right now. I'm like, how is this a two-man pod? So I look inside the pod. Turns out, they put the second Kerbal on the roof. which is, you know, a bit odd. So the Kerbals just sort of sit on the roof. That's not what we said when we put another seat in it. But hey, you know, we'll pretend that they put the seat inside. Oh, yeah, some of the mods are a little janky. Anyway, though, it has become time to leave. We've flipped our rover and have nothing left to do. So, we decouple the second stage and take off rather beautifully. I love the look of a landing stage sitting on the moon as you escape with your second stage. I really wanted to go for that. That's one of my favorite kind of shots of any Apollo mission is the landing stage left on the moon. So that's what I went for here, and I really liked that takeoff. I thought it was great with the decoupling fairings and everything. And then we'll push on into orbit with this very little second stage. I like how this looks. It's kind of... Why are the Kerbals on the roof? We forgot the keys. What do you want us to do? Oh, dumb. Anyway. But no, I really like how this looks with the engine tucked in between the kind of star of fuel tanks. I think it looks... I just really like this. We actually did spend some time on the moon warping until we were in the right place. So I think, yeah, it was about a 2-hour mission. Not bad. So yeah. It's gone pretty well so far. This is not the... there are still some things that could go wrong. We could... fail to rendezvous, fail to dock, fail to re-enter. A lot of things can go horribly wrong between now and being in the ocean. So let's hope they don't. So yeah, I'm just burning fairly flatly because that's about as efficient as you can do it. I have more than enough Delta V again. I wasn't going to take any risks of getting stuck on the moon. That wouldn't be great. And yeah, and now we're just going to plan our little maneuvers so that we can, well, meet the capsule. We'll just burn into a slightly higher orbit so that we have a higher orbital period, and then we'll meet them in one orbit's time. We'll have to do a bit of an inclination change because we're not perfectly inclined, because, well, we didn't hit the moon on the equator. Which actually would be a problem in real life because there are actually very few stable orbits around the moon. It's not very uniform, so a lot of the orbits don't actually work. They tested a bunch of satellites on the Apollo missions, and most of them crashed because, well, there's not very many stable configurations. Anyway, we do our inclination change after getting into orbit, and now we should hopefully meet up very closely with the command module, and we do. We just do a few tweaks with our engine to try and get as close as possible, and I think after a while we get within 200 meters, so then we'll just be able to maneuver manually in. I'm just doing little bursts of the engine. The second stage engine has infinite ignitions. It's pressure fed, so there's no problem there. Obviously the landing stage had limited ignitions because, well, 15 ignitions is more than enough to land, but we didn't know how many we'd need for the second stage because we'd have to do things like this. Anyway, after a bunch of maneuvering, we do get close to the spacecraft, and we'll use our RCS now to move in. Just using hydrazine. Yeah, we had more than enough hydrazine. We did refill it on the moon before we left. I didn't show that, but we did with the extra tank we had. So yeah, had more than enough. I went way overboard with the fuel. You can see we still have 200 meters per second of Delta V, but yeah, everything seems like it went well though. I'm pretty proud of this so far, but it is not over. Anyway, so we dock and well, we dock right now. Ugh. I always do it so slowly, it takes ages. But there we go. There we go. And then we get our crew across. We decouple the landing module, and it actually is autonomous, so we deorbit it so that we don't create too much space junk. We can see it flying away there nicely. And then it's time to leave the moon. So here we go, firing up the engines, doing our 700 meters per second, well, 780 meters per second Delta V burn to arrive back at Earth, which will be nice. I've probably been calling it Kerbin this whole episode. I apologize, I'm just used to it. And this does mean we'll have almost 400 meters per second left to do a slowdown maneuver at the other end so that we won't burn up, because the heat shields are almost good enough for coming back from the moon. So yeah, we have 377 meters per second, and we'll use that on arrival over, where are we? I think we're over Asia right now. I'm not entirely sure. It's hard to tell when you're up close. Looks like there's some mountains maybe, I don't know. I don't have the highest texture pack because, I don't know, because RAM. Anyway, so we do our slowdown maneuver, keep using the RCS as well. We're actually in a better configuration than in the testing in the one we did last episode, the test. I did copy the path so that we'd be at a 70 kilometer periapsis, and then a 70 megameter apoapsis, but we actually got that down a little bit. We almost got hit by some debris there, but we're okay. It burned up just before it hit us. And yeah, the re-entry goes well, burns off a lot of ablator, but I think we have about 10 units more left than last time, so I'm very confident about re-entry. It's looking good. All the testing went well. We've had a lot of things burn up in the atmosphere, but not this. We did, of course, lose the drogue chutes, as usual, but we don't need the drogue chutes. I really should have just taken them off and saved some fuel, you know? But, no, anyway, everything's fine now. And we're coming in over the Sahara, I believe, now. The very, very bright Sahara. And we should land somewhere near India, if the heat shield holds up. But it absolutely should, considering the test was slightly more strenuous and survived. And so this should too. But it does come pretty close. I think we end up with like 25 units of ablator left. And yeah, not super... not the nicest of things. Anyway, but it looks like we will be coming down in the ocean now. I guess... you know, America will have to send their aircraft carrier far to reach us, but it should be fine. And yes, the parachutes deploy, and all is good. And I won't couple the heat shield early, because that tends to kill people. And we don't want to fuck it up right now, 200 meters above the water. But yes, we're about to touch down now. The mission successful. Went almost without a hitch. I mean, we did flip the rover and, you know, couldn't transfer our crew, but I have to say, one of the more, you know, perfect missions I've ever done. This is not the last episode, though, of course. I hinted last episode that I would be doing something extra for episode 8. Something cool, something, I don't know, something unique, something just fun. So yeah, there'll be another episode of, well, you'll see. I don't want to give anything away, I have a surprise planned. So yeah, anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you have enjoyed this series and are looking forward to the finale in probably a week or two. These haven't been coming out every week because I've been very busy with other series and uni and shit. So yeah, hopefully the next episode will come out next week, but it might not. It might be the week after. So anyway, yeah, anyway. So like I said, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed our little jaunt to the moon today. And yeah, this has been KSP with Tape. I'll see you next time.